Good morning and welcome to our Sunday presentation. United Lodge of Theosophists, Washington, D.C. meets every Sunday at 11 a.m. for the discussion of a particular topic. Today's presentation will be on Through the Gates of Gold, and next week the topic will be Three Doors to Knowledge. Please also note that we meet every first and third Sunday of the month at 12:30 p.m. to read and discuss selected theosophical writings. We're currently having roundtable discussions on the Bhagavad Gita. Our lodge, United Lodge of Theosophists, is guided by its declaration, which states the following. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy, and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization. And it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes, and who desire to fit themselves, by study and otherwise, to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading comes from the voice of the silence. And now, thyself is lost in self, thyself unto thyself, merged in that self from which thou first didst radiate. Where is thy individuality, Lanu? Where the Lanu himself? It is the spark lost in the fire, the drop within the ocean, the ever-present ray become the all, and the eternal radiance. And now, Lanu, thou art the doer and the witness, the radiator and the radiation, light in the sound, and the sound in the light. Thou art acquainted with the five impediments, O Blessed One. Thou art their conqueror, the master of the sixth, the deliverer of the four modes of truth. The light that falls upon them shines from thyself, O thou who was disciple, but art teacher now. And of these modes of truth, hast thou now passed through knowledge of all misery, truth the first? Hast thou now conquered the Maras's king at sea, the portal of assembling, truth the second? Hast thou not sin at the third gate destroyed, and truth the third attained? Hast thou not entered Tao, the path that leads to knowledge, the fourth truth? And now rest neath the Bodhi tree, which is perfection of all knowledge. For know, thou art the master of Samadhi, the state of faultless vision. Behold, thou hast become the light, thou hast become the sound, thou art thy master and thy God. Thou art thyself, the object of thy search, the voice unbroken, that resounds throughout eternities, exempt from change, from sin exempt, the seven sounds in one. The voice of the silence. Om Tat Sat. And now for today's talk.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome, friends. These two books, Light on the Path and Through the Gates of Gold, are related, because Through the Gates of Gold is actually an explanation for this little book, Light on the Path. Now, all of these criteria that appear in these books is also in the voice of the silence. Thank you. So we'll refer to them as we go along. Through the Gates of Gold has these 5 chapters in it, which the names appear on the board. The search for pleasure, the mystery of threshold, the initial effort, the meaning of pain, and the secret of strength. And when you look at this, you realize at first sight that we're talking about the earth plane where we are and our senses. In other words, what affects us on this plane of existence. And we need to know why this is so. Now, when we go to Light on the Path, it states that these rules are for everyone. Kill out ambition, kill out desire of life, kill out desire of comfort, work as those work who are ambitious, respect life as those do who desire it, be happy as those are who live for happiness. Now, in each chapter, this discussion is about the opposites. And when you come to understand the clear writing, is very easy to understand. Through the Gates of Gold is written in a very precision manner. Its language is very simple and it is very understandable. And Mr. Judge at that time wrote an article on it saying that each student of Theosophy need to pay attention to Light on the Path as well as Through the Gates of Gold. In the instructions themselves, we're told, as we go along reading it intellectually, that there will come a point in these books where we won't be able to really understand it. Why? Because these books are written in code and we need to read on the astral light. And without that, it is simply an intellectual study. But with all of the mystical books, it is stated that we need to read underneath what is being written on the page. Why? Again, we need to ask these questions because we are the students, we are studying it. Because it is not the words that give the meaning as to what they are. What is it? It's the ideas that it holds. That is why when you read both HPB's and Mr. Judge's explanations, they never make the same statement twice. It's always something different because they're bringing our attention to the idea behind the words. And that is the secret for understanding these books. And in their writings, it says that one has to ponder on what is on that page or on any page. And his thought, swinging free from familiar notion, responds to currents running underneath the forms of expression and finds himself embarking on excursions to points he would not otherwise have tried to reach. In other words, when we read these books and we're enmeshed and engrossed in it, it moves us into places that we would not ordinarily be able to move on our own. And so this is truly a study, but also invitation to others to embark on it as we do ourselves. So, the guidance in mysticism that appears on the Light on the Path was written and published before Through the Gates of Gold. And we need to bear this in mind as stated because one without the other really does not make any sense. Now the Gates of Gold represents the entrance to that realm of the soul unknowable through our physical perceptions. Physical perceptions will not enable us, in other words, to understand the gates of God. It is trying to move us into that region where it is beyond the physical. It speaks to the Western world in its own language, and so if we pay attention to it, we can understand it. Those of us who are constantly asking for practical instruction or practical help will find it in this book. And also those who are not aware of Theosophy, but if they read these books, they also will get some guidance from it, because it will move them into that region where we feel very comfortable in our state, because we fall into what? A rut. What does Mr. Judge call that? He says we make grooves in the brain, and those grooves enable us to automatically go to those places that we like to think about. What this is trying to do is to move us out of the grooves and out of the rut, and move us into the region where we do not understand that region with our physical perceptions. So it is going to help us develop the inner perceptions. So, as we said, those are the titles. Instead of speculating upon mysteries that lie at the very end of man's destiny, and which cannot be approached by conjecture, this work sensibly starts with the senses, what we are close to. At the outset, we must cope with sensation and learn its nature and meaning. We are not enjoined to kill out sensation, but to kill out the desire for sensation. This is in the light on the path. And many, unfortunately, misread it because they do not understand what that means, kill out the desire for sensation. So to extract the meaning which it holds, we have to pause and consider the lessons that we learn from pleasure and pain, and what the causes are, who is bringing it on, who is doing the suffering, in other words. So perhaps we'll start with that. Who is doing the bringing about occurrences in our life that we suffer either pleasure or pain? Because HPB says there's only one sense, and this differentiates itself. And so at this time we have 5 senses. Obviously we're going to end up with 7 senses at the end of the 7th round. So if we look at it, we need to push the pain from its threshold all the way to its maturity to see what it is, because we will realize that what does it do? It joins the line to the pleasure, because opposites are always there. We will never get rid of them on this plane. So who is bringing it on? And who is suffering? We have to ask it. Otherwise we will never find out what it is and why we have it. And one student asks, it is said that if men will pause and consider what lessons they have learned from pleasure and pain, much might be guessed of that strange thing which causes these effects. What is that a strange thing? Can it be the higher self? If so, in what sense can it be a strange thing? And we'll come back to it. So, what are these gates that we're talking about? These gates, it is stated, admit us to the sanctuary of man's own nature, to the place whence his life power comes, and where he himself is the priest of his own shrine. It needs but a strong hand to push them open. The courage to enter them is the courage to search in the recesses of our own nature what is there without fear or shame. In the fine part, the essence, the flavor of the man, is found the key which unlocks those great gates. What is the first criteria we must consider in this effort? Killing out separateness is the first criteria, because until we understand that the soul is part of all the other souls and all of us constitute the one life, we truly cannot understand what that stuff is. We have to not just intellectually understand it, but internally perceive it. We must perceive it. Only then can we become true brothers and sisters to all those who live around us. And it says here, which is a sentence that we need to ponder about. It is essential to discriminate, not to bring into our life the confusions of our sleep. If we do, we will fall back into the darkness where there is no friend but chaos. This chaos, it is stated, has followed every effort of man that is written in history. After civilization has flowered, the flower falls and dies, and winter and darkness destroy it. In this last sentence, says Mr. Judge, is indicated the purpose of civilization. It is the blossoming of a race with the purpose of producing a certain spiritual fruit. This fruit having ripened, then the degeneration of the great residuum begins to be worked over and over again in the ground fermenting processes of reincarnation. Our great civilization now has flowered, and for that reason, this extraordinary effort for the mystic teachings was brought forward. So, the mystery of the threshold, we are told, only a man who has the potentialities of both being a voluptuary and a stoic has ever a chance entering the golden gates. He must be capable of tasting and testing and valuing to its most delicate fraction every joy existence has to give, and he must be capable of denying himself all pleasure, and that without suffering from the denial. This is stated in all of the books. When pleasure comes, in whatever form it is ours to enjoy. But when it is taken, neither do we have the right to complain or think that it should have been there for all time, because we know opposite exists and one will follow the other. The aim of this book is to show us that we can escape it, but we can rise above it. So the initial effort may burst the shell that holds us in darkness, tear the veil that hides the eternal from us, and at any moment where it is the easiest for each one of us to do so, and we find this most of the time in the least expected places. So, since this experience is different for each one of us, no set rules can be applied to it. We all have to find it for ourselves. And in the Gates of Gold we are told that all the steps that make up the ladder are necessary. And it is written, the spirit is not a gas created by matter, and we cannot create our future by forcibly using one material agent and leaving out the rest. The spirit is the great life on which matter rests, and we all know that, because homogeneity has to be reached in order for these differences to disappear. And when we look at our world, we also know that the ether, not the ether of science, but the ether of the old alchemists and mystics, is what we're referring to here, holds the rocky world that we're living on. So we have to break down these limitations in order to be able to see the gleam of the gold, which is just a little bit beyond. To the one who has lifted the golden latch, the spring of sweet waters, the fountain itself, whence all softness arises, is opened and becomes part of his heritage. But before this can be reached, a heavy weight has to be lifted from the heart, an iron bar that holds it in place. Iron bar holds it in place. And the Eastern philosophical books call it a knot. And we have to undo the knot in the heart. Which heart are we talking about? Well, obviously, we're not talking about the muscular heart, which is the physical heart, so we think it is physical anyway, but the inner heart. We just read it in the Voice of the Silence. The inner heart is, the inner recesses of the inner heart is called Brahma-pura. Obviously, this is the heart we are referring to, and not the physical heart. That is what we are referring to. So here we are being shown that occultism is not dry and dreadful as far as karma is concerned, but that there is a sweetness in it. We just read it, that we can reach it, and it will allow us to remove this iron bar from the heart so that we can know what it is. So we then ask What is that iron bar? What is the knot? And we are answered. It is the astringent power of self, of egotism, of the idea of separateness. This idea has many strongholds. It holds its most secret court and deepest counsels near the far removed depths and center of the heart. So the iron bar is egotism, our own egotism, and it holds an iron bar or a knot where the heart cannot express its true power. It cannot express its true power because that knot or the iron bar holds it in place and does not allow it. And Mr. Judge says we can cut that knot and go right through it to the center of the heart. But he also says that the assault on the soul is so very great, not many of us would be able to withstand it. Assault. So that is why these 5 were given, so that we can start from the outside with our senses and slowly go into the heart. But if we could reach the heart, this is where the real fight occurs. Without that fight being won, we cannot become knowledgeable in the sense that we want to be. So, this is a materialistic age. And most of the time, we're talking about our senses and not the inner senses and what they represent. But the focus point in the heart is that of a spirit. It's for knowledge and it is power. And from that point, the converged rays begin to spread out fan-like until they embrace the universe. So it is the gate. So we are talking about the inner heart. And it is at that neutral spot of concentration that the pillars and the doors are fixed. And beyond it, that glorious golden light burns and throws up a burnished glow. So, in the Upanishads, it is the knot, and we have to enter it within the heart and go beyond it. In other words, we have to go beyond the ether. So, we can go to the center of the heart, but we need to be aware of the assault on the difficulties that we're going to face in order to do that, to be able to fight it in the heart. And so egotism, our idea of separateness, starts with the physical body. Because we have a physical body, it gives the impression that we are all separate, but we are not. We are all souls, and our soul nature is the same, so we need to concentrate on that, and these 5 enable us to do that. So we talked about pain and pleasure a little bit before, and Mr. Judge in his writings state that pain arouses, softens, breaks, and destroys. Perhaps we should put that on the board. Sorry. Pain. Arouses. Softens. Breaks. and destroys. So, if we move ourselves away from it and look at it in an removed state, we will see that it appears as medicine, as a knife, as a weapon, as poison. So, there is its significance. So it is an implement, obviously, that is used to bring about results. Who is bringing the pain on? And in all of the writings, it is stated that our earth life is a reflection of our spiritual life. So obviously the self is bringing this on, so that we can learn a lesson from what is being provided. And who's using it? Some part of us is using it, but the rest of it, to the rest of that, it is very hateful. We don't want it there. So then, we cannot get rid of it, but we can learn to join them together. It's because nature does not separate things into good or bad, desirable or undesirable. We, human beings, are the one that does that. So we have to join them. In the Secret Doctrine, what does HPB tell us? On page, I believe it is from 289 to 294 or 95, she tells us that the first initial step in the process of that light differentiating is polarity. Polarity is negative, positive. So this is in us too. It is all of nature. Without polarity, without this opposite, we would never be able to differentiate between anything. So for our learning experience, it is there. But when we join them, and it's the same with the two sexes, because in the higher realm there is really no sex. It's just our physical existence that makes us that way. So, in the merging and making the two into one, a joy and deep sensation of profound peace is found. And so the God in man, dominant and real, then makes itself known to us. The seeming paradox that a God exists within each man is made clear when we perceive that our separate existence is an illusion. The physical, which makes us separate individuals, must eventually fall away, leaving each man one with all men and with God, the infinite. The secret of strength, and there's a lot of discussion about that, where it says that religion makes the greatest mistake by dividing good and evil. Nature does not divide. It does not know any such distinction. And since religion is man-made, it cannot therefore be the whole truth. And this God kills each man once in life. Every day the fierce elements and strange circumstances, which he is said to be the author of, bring on famine, cold, innumerable untimely deaths. Where then, in the true, can there be any room for such distinctions as right and wrong? The student or disciple must, as he walks on that path, abide by law and order. But if he pins his faith on any religion whatever, he will stop at once whether it be Mahatmas, gods, Krishna, Vedas. Any one of these will stop him and throw him into a rut from which even heavenly death will not release him. Religion can teach us morals and ethics, but it cannot answer, what am I? Why am I here? And what is the purpose of life? And the book closes with some hints, because a lot of us, including the students of Theosophy, seek to ignore one half of their nature, which is here taught to be necessary. Instead of crushing out the animal nature, here we are taught to value it and to learn to understand it and subordinate it to the spiritual. The God in man, it states, degraded is a thing unspeakable in its infamous power of production. The animal in man, elevated, is a thing unimaginable in its great powers of service and of strength. And we are told that our animal self is a great force. The old world magician and the coming race that Lord Linton foreshadowed. But this power can only be attained, it is stated, by giving the God the sovereignty. Make your animal ruler over yourself, and he will never rule others. So, in closing, 3 sentences should be imprinted on every mind of each student, in reverse order that we have talked about. Secreted and hidden in the heart of the world and the heart of man is the light which can illumine all life, the future and the past. So that light in the heart is that powerful. On the mental steps of 1,000,000 men, Buddha passed through the gates of gold, and because a great crowd pressed about the threshold, he was able to leave behind him words which prove that those gates will open. And so the light of the voice of the silence also makes the same statement. This is one of the most important factors in the development of man, the recognition, profound and complete recognition of the law of unity, that is universal unity and coherence, because opposite of coherence is dispersion. So now we will open it for your questions. Yes?
Can you please provide references as to how one can read these articles? Is it through the gates of gold? How can one get their hands on?
Yeah, on the gates of gold is Mr. Judge's article, so it should be under his writings.
Okay. Through the gates of gold?
Through the gates of gold is his writing.
Okay.
And then there were questions asked when he first printed it, and perhaps we should go over them. And that is also with the article.
Okay.
That is referenced. I don't have the page number or the... it's in the Theosophy magazine. If you just punch the title, Through the Gates of God, it will pop out. And the first one that was asked was about pain and pleasure, and we read it, and we will read his answer to it. So what is the lesson learned from pleasure and pain, the opposites of which human life at one stage seems entirely to consist, and we all have it in our lives? Pleasure may be sought and pain avoided, but not successfully and not forever. Yet the state of pain and pleasure is not changeless, not eternal. The human being, every human being knows moments which belong not at all to this pair of opposites, moments removed from sensations that come and go and are brief and changeable. Is it a pleasure or a pain to have an instant of self-knowledge, a recognition of the justice of karma, or a perception of the path ahead. He says, knowledge, perception, realization, these have no organic connection with sensation. They belong to the ego, who is beyond the pairs of opposites, who incarnates into pain and pleasure as he does into other conditions of material existence. So here it is. He says, knowledge, perception, realization. Have no organic connection with sensation. In other words, they're internal to each human being, and we have those moments when something clicks in your mind and you know that what you're thinking is true, and you perceive it, and then you realize it. And then he says they belong to the ego, who is beyond the pairs of opposites. So that quiet center that we talked about in the heart, right beyond it is the light in the core of the heart, the neutral center. So that center is the knower in each human being. That's our true self. So through the gates of gold says, not twice can the same cup of pleasure be tasted. The second time it must contain either a grain of poison or a drop of the elixir of life, because the mind of man is inevitably altered by each experience, and the will of man imparts new energy into the supposed repetition. The same holds for the drought of pain. No sensation can be changeless if the spirit alone is unmodified. That the strange thing which brings us not pleasure and pain, but the experience we interpret according to these opposites, is spirit. The karmic ego, intending that the evolving man should abandon the fruitless attempt to hold on to one half of the illusory pair while trying to protect himself against its inescapable twin. Both pain and pleasure come intermittently, but who is bringing it about? Spirit, the reincarnating ego, our higher triad, in other words, is bringing it about as a learning experience to teach us that we're not separate from everyone else, but that we conform to a unity in nature, which is a fact, and so that all the souls eventually will learn that the opposite will keep coming unless we finally realize that we are part of the whole, but not just intellectually, but through perception and realization. And that we don't want to work for the self. We're talking about this self here. Egoism, remember? But we're going to work for the whole. We have to make an attempt to work for the whole, whether it is within the family, within the community, and within our nation first. And that's how we start at that quiet center and enlarge the circle so that our influence also becomes greater as we go along. Yes?
Can you talk about the symbolic meaning of this gold gate, where it comes from? Yeah, the student knows in the Egyptian mysteries as well, they have that.
Yeah, because they represent 7 steps which cannot be escaped from. We're doing all this cleansing, which is what really is, but in this particular book, it is very succinctly stated in regular language that we can understand. But if you go to the book, is it on 52? Yeah, here we go. Thou seest well, Lanu, these portals portals lead the aspirant across the waters onto the other shore. What's the other shore? The region of the soul we're talking about today. We're trying to get to the threshold and then have the courage to step beyond it. Until we enter it, nothing can be done. And then she says, each portal hath a golden key that openeth its gate. And these keys are Dana, the key of charity and love immortal; Sheila, the key of harmony in word and act, the key that counterbalances the cause and effect and leaves no further room for karmic action; Shanti, patience the sweet that naught can ruffle; Viraga, indifference to pleasure, we just talked about, and pain, illusion conquered because it's mayavic, truth alone perceived; Virya, the dauntless energy. Where is the energy? The will of man and the energy is connected. We just talked about the inner heart, Brahma-pura, where that neutral center is, and we have to reach it and then a step beyond it in order to see that golden light. But intermittently it shows itself to us, but we just refuse to take notice of it. Virya, the dauntless energy that fights its way to the supernal truth. Homogeneity, heterogeneity. That's the opposites again, is it not? Heterogeneity is essential because it produces the opposites into our lives to give us experience. How we interpret that as whether it is positive or negative is again a discriminative process that we have to learn to go through. Out of the mire of lies terrestrial, Diana, whose golden gate once opened, leads the Narjol toward the realm of Sat eternal and its ceaseless contemplation, where nothing disturbs it. It is as is, and it is in that state. Prajna, the key to which makes a man a god, creating him a bodhisattva, son of the Dhyanis. Such the portals are the golden keys. This is exactly expressing the same thing, but in different words, is it not? So, the 7 steps we have to go through. What is the recommended way to do it? We are told that it's a parabola. When you open the key with the key of Dana, the other opposite also opens to some degree, which is Prajna, the highest. So, as you're working constantly to express love, kindness, and charitableness and generosity in your life, the other side gains strength because it is a fight. We are truly fighting that because it's not a natural state of our being in this developmental stage. We are very materialistic and it clings to us or we cling to it, however way you want to look at it. And we need to separate ourselves from that because it's elusive power. What did we just read? That the God power misplaced cannot overcome what we have created with our own hands through millions of years of development. And until we put the God in that neutral center in charge of our lives, it can do nothing for us. But the golden light does show itself. What is the golden light? It's who you are. It's who we all are. But you have to perceive it. And HPB tells us it is so very bright, we won't be able to look at it. That's why it's called dazzlement. Dazzlement is a statement for the personality, but not to the higher self, because what is it? It is that light. It's very tough to look at it because it's so very bright. She says we're just able to look at its reflection. And it is just beyond the neutral center in the heart. Another way of looking at it is, what are you doing in trying to meditate? First, we have to learn to concentrate, then contemplate, and eventually reach to samadhi, which is the highest level. In one life, we won't be perhaps able to achieve it, but we can certainly move in that direction. What is it you're trying to do in meditation? Are you not trying to reach your quiet center? What is it telling you to do? To leave the Mayavic elusive life, which is your earth, and you're not going out there, you're going inside of yourself, forgetting everything about the universe, and what else? Physical life. I think she describes. He who would hear the voice of nada, the soundless sound, and comprehend it, he has to learn the nature of dharana. Dharana is the intense and perfect concentration of the mind upon some one interior object, accompanied by complete abstraction from everything pertaining to the external universe or the world of the senses, which is what this is. It's telling you how to get the experience from the senses, learn it, but do what? Rise above it. Rising above it means going deep inside of yourself to the quiet center, the neutral point. It's the same thing. It's just different words that they use to describe the same process. But there was a little bit of something in here I wanted to read to you. Mr. Judge writes about virtue, and he says, in repeating the book itself, virtue, or what seems to each man to be virtue, his own special standard of morality and purity, is held by those who practice it to be a way to heaven. But the pure life and high thoughts are no more finalities in themselves than any other mode of enjoyment. What is sometimes spoken of in the theosophical literature as virtues are something quite else. In the first place, they depend on no one man's special standard of morality. Any special standard, any private good defined as the object of virtue, removes ethics from the real sphere of universal philosophy and is merely sublimated selfishness. The virtues are of material life, unless in and through their performance man is making his action count for the progress of the whole. The aroma of his good deeds is their beneficent influence on others, and this because his motive is in the action itself and not in its reward. Our hearts are thus no better than our motives, he says, no matter how much we may wish to believe the contrary. And while the proverb has it that the heart of another is a dark forest, this should not be true of a man's own heart or motives. So it's the heart that holds the motive. We always think it's the brain, but it isn't. Because our heart is set on doing something. And if the doing something is for a larger sphere than our own, then we're on the right track. Yes?
We humans avoid pain at all costs, physical and emotional. But you mentioned in the fourth line there, the meaning of pain you put is a weapon, is a knife, and several other things. Should we look at pain as something that could be good and it could be useful to our advancement or evolution? And
so your question is that we look on pain as a negative influence on us when it comes, and should we look at it as a beneficent influence that is trying to teach us something? Mm-hmm. Is that your question?
Sort of. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, all our life is composed of opposites. Mm. Opposites. And whether we want it or not, we fluctuate between the two. We have, say, a pleasant experience that we like, and that is to the liking of the personality, because perhaps it doesn't have to do anything. But when the pain comes, it is there as a teacher. Pain is a teacher. And Mr. Judge said, what did he say? It is a knife, it is a poison, it has different functions in different events that come into our life, because it softens, it breaks. Well, look at the disease process, for instance, because it makes it very clear. When we have something that we call dis-ease, it means that that area is not in harmony with the rest of our body. It is disturbing it, actually, with its function. So we're trying to get rid of it. It says it softens, it breaks, and it removes it. Even in the disease process, that same thing occurs. What are we removing? Elementals. Elementals. We're removing the elementals that do not want to work in harmony with the rest, but where is the impulse is coming from? Because it's the mind, the motive, that gives the impulse for harmony, for unity. And if I'm giving the opposite impulse, or I have given it in the past, and it is now maturing, I have to go through that process of learning. And the question to ask is, what is this event in my life teaching me? What must I learn from it? What is being taught? What must I learn from this event? Because if I don't learn it, it will repeat itself. It will come back again and again and again, not in the same form and same circumstance exactly, but until I learn that lesson, it will repeat itself. So we all have experienced this in our lives. So as soon as we learn it, HPV says, it just totally vanishes. It has nothing to hold on to. It just washes itself out. You had a question?
The very same question that Carolina had. I'm seeing that as a teaching tool, like you said, to achieve balance. And it's necessary while we're embodied.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for your comment. Yes, to reach balance, harmony, unity. In other words, the body parts are all working in harmony with one another. That's the first criteria. But remember what she also tells us. It starts from the mind, and it has to come through all of the levels, the last being the physical body. Whatever ailment we have comes to the physical body last. But going backwards, we have to eliminate it from the body first, and then go onto all the other levels, eventually reaching the mind where the seed is. Then you have to remove it from there, from the mind. Because I brought it onto myself. If I'm ill, I have something to do with it. No power out there can decide how I should suffer. My own soul knows what I need. The soul cannot be fooled. And we're going to grow according to that program, the internal one, that teaches us what we need to know. And we cannot skip any one of these steps. Each one is necessary to reach the threshold is necessary, but even once we find that neutral center, we have to move across the threshold into the light. Other than that, it will not do.
So we are a soul, we have a body.
Correct. We are souls, we
And
each
that
have a body.
Is an opportunity for, and again, that's an opportunity to learn, as well as our vehicle while we're here.
We are limitless, but the body makes us think that we are limited. So we have to grow beyond all those limitations and truly perceive our true nature. Only then can we step across the threshold from the neutral center into the light. And then we have put the God in us in its rightful place. And the second part of the book says, don't then fight the fight yourself. Now that your higher self is your aid, allow it to fight for you. That is when we become a servant to humanity, and whatever the inner life shows, that's what we follow. What did Gandhi say? He said, when that voice was silent, he did nothing. In other words, he was guided from inside out. And those who do achieve tremendous benefits for humanity. But we have to get there first. Thank you. If there are no other questions, the next week talk is 3 Doors to Knowledge. Thank you for joining us.